everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into our body's electrical wiring, neurophysiology. We're going to go on a journey zooming in from the entire nervous system all the way down to the single spark that makes everything happen. My goal is to give you a super clear, exam-ready understanding of how it all works.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with the big picture foundation of the nervous system. Then, we'll zoom in on that electrical spark, the action potential. We'll follow how that message gets handed off between cells at the synapse, see how these tiny signals lead to actual actions, and then we'll get to the best part, cracking the exam code to make sure you know exactly what to focus on.
All right, let's get started. First up, we've got to build the foundation. Let's look at the big picture of your body's incredible command center.
You know, if you boil the entire nervous system down to its most basic job, this is it. It's a simple loop. You take in information from your senses, that's sensory input. Your brain and spinal cord figure out what it means, that's the integration part, and then it sends out a command, that's the motor output. See, process, react. That's the whole game.
Okay, so how is it all organized? Well, we basically split it into two main parts. You've got the central nervous system, the CNS, which is your brain and spinal cord. That's the command center, the central processor. Then you have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. Think of that as all the wiring, all the nerves that connect the command center to everything else in your body. So the CNS thinks, and the PNS talks.
Now, let's meet the absolute star of the show, the neuron. This is the single cell that does all the heavy lifting. Think of it this way. Information comes in through those branchy parts, the dendrites. It gets processed in the main cell body, the soma, and if the signal is strong enough, a new message gets fired out along that long tail, the axon. It's that same pattern, input, process, output.
But you know, neurons can't do it all on their own. They have this incredible support staff called glial cells. These are truly the unsung heroes of the nervous system. They do everything from feeding the neurons to wrapping them in insulation, that's called myelination, and they even act as the brain's personal immune system.
And here you can really see the difference, right? On the left, you've got the neuron with its long axon, perfectly built for sending signals over a distance. And on the right, you have an astrocyte, a type of glial cell. Look how it branches out everywhere. It's designed to support and connect with multiple neurons at once. It's a total team effort. The neurons are the stars, but the glia are the whole support crew.
So, how does a neuron even get ready to send a signal? Well, when it's just sitting there, not firing, its outer membrane is polarized. The best way to think about it is like a tiny charged battery. There's a difference in charge between the inside and the outside, and it's just holding on to that potential energy, waiting for something to happen. And this isn't just some abstract idea, we can actually measure it. In a typical neuron just hanging out, that resting charge is sitting at around -70 millivolts. That's its baseline, just waiting for the call to action. Okay, so we've got our charged battery. Now let's talk about the spark itself, the action potential. This is the universal language that every single neuron uses to communicate. And there it is. This is the classic picture of a neuron firing. This graph shows the action potential. It's this super fast all or none electrical spike that shoots down the axon. Now that phrase all or none is absolutely crucial. It means the neuron either fires at 100% full strength or it doesn't fire at all. It's like a light switch. It's either fully on or fully off. No dimming. So let's trace this journey on the graph. It all starts when incoming signals push the neuron to a certain tipping point, the threshold. That's step 1. That triggers step 2, depolarization, where channels fly open and sodium ions rush into the cell, making the inside suddenly positive. Then comes step 3, repolarization. The sodium channels close, and now potassium channels open, letting potassium flow out to bring the charge back down. It usually overshoots a little bit, that's hyperpolarization, before everything settles back to rest. Now, it's super important not to get these action potentials confused with something called graded potentials. Think of graded potentials as little ripples in a pond. They're small, local changes in charge. Their strength can vary, and they can add up. But an action potential, that's the big wave. It's all or none. It travels a long way without fading, and it has a fixed strength.
So, the signal has raced down one neuron's axon. But what happens next? How does it jump from that neuron to the next cell in line? Well, that all happens at a tiny gap called the synapse, and it's all about passing the message.
Turns out there are two main ways to do this. You have electrical synapses, which are basically direct physical connections. It's like touching two wires together. They're incredibly fast. Then you have chemical synapses, which are much more common. Here, there's a tiny gap, and the message has to be carried across by chemical messengers. This introduces a very slight but really important delay. Let's zoom in on that chemical synapse, because that's where most of the interesting stuff happens. The electrical action potential zips down to the end of the first neuron and bam! It triggers the release of these little chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. These molecules float across that tiny gap, the synaptic cleft, and lock into receptors on the next neuron. So the signal goes from electrical to chemical and then back to electrical. Pretty cool, huh?
But here's the thing. Not just any chemical gets to be a neurotransmitter. It has to meet some really strict criteria, kind of like a job application. First, it has to be made and stored inside that first neuron. Second, it has to be released when the signal arrives. Third, the neuron on the other side has to have specific receptors for it. And finally, and this is critical, there has to be a way to get rid of it afterward, to turn the signal off.
Okay, we've gone from the big picture system down to the cell, all the way to the signal itself. Now for the really cool part, let's connect all these tiny sparks to the things we actually do. How do these signals make things happen in the real world?
And there's no better place to see this in action than at the neuromuscular junction, or NMJ for short. This is that very specific, highly specialized synapse where a motor neuron connects directly to a muscle fiber. This is literally where your brain's command turns into physical movement.
So check out how this works. First, the action potential from the neuron gets to the end and releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, or ACH. Second, that ACH floats across the synapse and binds to receptors on the muscle cell. Third, that binding triggers a brand new action potential in the muscle fiber itself. And finally, that muscle action potential causes a flood of calcium to be released inside the cell, which is the final trigger that makes the muscle contract. A signal becomes an action, right there.
Of course, not all signals are about flexing your bicep. A lot of this stuff is happening automatically in the background, keeping you alive. That's run by the autonomic nervous system, which has two competing teams. You have the sympathetic system, that's your fight or flight response. It gets you amped up, makes your heart race. And then you have its counterpart, the parasympathetic system, that's rest and digest. It calms things down and focuses on housekeeping tasks. They're constantly in a state of balance.
All right, deep breath. We have covered a ton of ground. But this next part, this is the whole reason you're here. We are going to crack the exam code. We're going to boil all this down to the highest yield facts that you absolutely positively have to know.
And we are not just guessing. Look at this data from exams between 2018 and 2024. It's crystal clear where the questions are. Synaptic transmission, nervous tissue and cells, and the neuromuscular junction. These are the big three. This tells you exactly where to point your study flashlight. Okay, you ready? Let's do a rapid-fire rundown of the must-know facts. Number 1, that resting potential is about -70 millivolts, and that's mainly because of potassium ions leaking out of the cell. 2, the sodium-potassium pump is working 24/7 to maintain that, kicking 3 sodiums out for every 2 potassiums it brings in. 3, the action potential is all or none, driven by sodium rushing in and potassium flowing out. Got it?
And let's keep it rolling. Fact 4, signals travel faster down axons that are fatter and have that myelin insulation. 5, chemical synapses always have a slight delay, but electrical ones are pretty much instant. And finally, number 6, and this is a big one, the little input signals, the postsynaptic potentials, are graded and can add up. The big output signal, the action potential, is not graded and does not add up. So we've seen how it all works, right? How this incredible cascade of ions and chemicals can become a thought, a feeling, a memory, or an action. It's pretty amazing that it all just starts with a tiny spark. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If every single thought you have is a signal firing through your neural network, what are you telling yourself right now?